Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear this? I think it wasn't switched on properly. Okay. High tech, high talk, which means technical issues give suffering. So today I'd like to give a talk on a word that you may know, which is bhāvanā, which means to cultivate. We talk bhāvanā, and that Pali word is often translated as to meditate. We're going to do some bhāvanā, we're going to do some meditation. But actually the Pali word bhāvanā was defined by the Buddha in a very broad sense. It wasn't just defined as the development of meditation. So I wanted to cover each aspects of the Buddha's definition of bhāvanā, cultivation, development, and so that you can listen to that and see what is useful and make use of that in your practice. The first definition of cultivation and development in life, the Buddha defined as kaya bhāvanā, which means to actually cultivate your physical existence. So we can see that in our impact as our lives in the world, people are starting to consider the way that they are living and the impact that it has on the environment, the people around them, and on themselves as well, in particular. And so the Buddha said and taught that we should cultivate our livelihoods and our lifestyle and our society and our cultures in a way which is sustainable development. That's not motivated by greed, it's not motivated by hatred, it's not motivated by delusion. So we see that human beings as a society, when we're born into that society, then we strive to make a living. So this is actually the Buddha giving instructions of how to make a living which is beneficial to yourselves and beneficial to others. Not harmful to yourself and not harmful to others. And that's the definition of ethical living. We often hear the idea of, what's the right thing to do? Is there such thing as ultimate right and wrong? What is the definition of ethics? What's the definition of morality? And I remember at university, when I was at university studying philosophy, and that was one of the great debates that go on at universities all over the world of what is right and wrong, good and evil. And when I came across Buddhism, I was very impressed by the simplicity and the profundity of the Buddha's definition of morality and ethics. And it's a practical definition in that you can, once you know it, then you can apply it in your life in all situations. And he defined moral and ethical living as being beneficial, doing something through body, speech and mind, which is beneficial to yourself and not harmful to yourself, cause suffering to yourself, and beneficial to others and not causing harm and suffering to others. So it's a very simple definition you can remember and make decisions about in your life now and in the future, of what's the right thing to do in a situation. And we're always sometimes challenged for making these decisions. So the Buddha said that it shouldn't cause suffering. What you do through your actions should not have a goal or result that causes suffering. So if you're choosing a pathway of action, choosing a pathway to speak or say something, or even how you think, it should be bringing happiness and benefits to yourself, or positive. Be positive and positiveness to yourself, and bring benefits and happiness to others as well. Because some things we may do may bring benefits to us, but is detrimental to others, takes advantage of others, abuses others, disadvantages them. That's not ethical behaviour or ethical speech or ethical thought. It should be something that enhances our life and enhances the lives of others. And so that also becomes the foundation for how do I cultivate my livelihood, my lifestyle, the way I'm living, and the direction I'm going in. You know, sometimes that may have an effect on, say, the job that you choose, you know, your career path in life. For example, you know, if you're going into the weapons industry, is that necessarily beneficial to oneself and beneficial to others? Or you're choosing to maybe, I'll get a job in advertising alcohol, or is that necessarily going to be beneficial to oneself and beneficial to others? So you can see that when that definition is in front of us, we can use that for making very clear decisions. What's the right thing to do? And all of us are challenged by those situations of, what should I do in this situation? How should I act? How should I speak? And when you have that definition, it should be beneficial to myself and bring happiness to myself, and also beneficial to others. Sometimes some people do things which is detrimental to themselves but beneficial to others. They think that is also praiseworthy. It's almost like I should sacrifice myself, even if I'm unhappy and suffering, for the benefits of others. The Buddha did not praise that. It should be mutually beneficial, mutually not producing suffering. So the quality of the Buddha's teachings always comes to that principle, not to increase suffering in the world, but out of compassion for oneself and for others. And that compassion is equal and universal, seeing no difference between yourself and others, and the happiness of yourself and happiness of others. Then you make your decisions according to that view. So when we're developing this Gāyānu bhāvanā, which is the development of the body, it means how do I live, eat, work, interact in society in a wholesome and skillful way, which is not destructive, which respects, for example, the value of the environment that you're in, the value of the things that you have, the value of the people around you, the value of the society, and tries to sustain things so that one's not motivated by just sheer greed to exploit the resources of the world, greed and aversion to take advantage of others. So when we have these principles, then we can see that you can lead a life quite skillfully. So, for example, in the monastery that I have in Thailand, we came there and we had an original piece of land which was offered, and then there was some farmland that was denigrated, and the villagers wanted to sell it because the wild animals would come down and eat their crops, and the soil was deteriorating. They weren't putting enough fertilizer and things like that, and so we did a regeneration project to plant forest, to regenerate that out, to make some lakes, to use the principles of recycling and natural fertilizers and things like that as just a part of the monastic lifestyle, even though you're living focused on meditation for liberation and nibbana and keeping on virtue, but you also have this responsibility to this piece of earth that you're living on and using, because the resources in your life, the things that come to you in your life, pass through your life, and it's how you use them and deal with them. Whether you use them and deal with them in a skillful way, using them for your benefit, but not to your detriment. And so the reason things come into our lives, whether finance, material things, people, is because of our karma. Yes? Because of our actions in the past, and also our karma that we're doing at the moment, then certain things arise. Our efforts, our energy at the moment, but also our good karma from the past. If we've done acts of generosity from the past, then we'll find that we'll have material well-being. If we haven't, then we'll find that we'll be physically struggling for material well-being. So the things that come into your life, realize that they are blessings from the past and the present that you have created, but it's how you use them which will determine whether those things will stay with you in now and into the future. The Buddha actually said that. He said that if a person receives wealth, receives property, receives material well-being, and that person uses it heedlessly, carelessly, foolishly, does not wisely use the material things in life with wise reflection, with investment, with consideration for the benefit of themselves and benefit of others, then those things will disappear, either by fire, flood, earthquake, wind, or relatives that don't love you, or through kings and taxes. Whereas a person who receives material well-being and blessings, and they come into their life and they're wise and reflective and use and protect them for their benefits in this lifetime, they invest them, they share them, they use them for the benefit of not only themselves and others, then those material things will last for a long time. They will not disappear through fire, floods, earthquakes, wind and water, or relatives that don't love you, and kings and taxes. It's a very interesting principle, isn't it? That you can see that the things that come, the Buddha is saying, the things that come into your life, you shouldn't take and think you are entitled to it. It's actually a gift of your good karma, the results of your good karma, But it's how you deal with that thing that passes through your life, that will reflect whether you have that in the future, whether you can sustain that wealth in the future, you can sustain that prosperity, whether you'll be reborn again in Singapore or born in some poverty-stricken country elsewhere because you've been careless, heedless, greedy, selfish, and haven't shared and been benefit to others. So this is a very important thing that I want to pass on to you, because you are blessed. You're in a very safe, developed, prosperous country, very beautiful country, and through the energies and resources of both the government in the past and the present, and the skill and intelligence of the people, hard-workingness of the people, you've made this a very successful environment. But also it's limited, and there's pressures on it, and so the things that we have to look at those as very precious and treat them as very precious, so that we can sustain them for both ourselves and into the future as well, for our future generations. So this is this Gaya Bhāvanā, how the Buddha taught about human beings, how to live. The Buddha was very wise. He wasn't just talking about liberation from this universe. He was dealing with daily life as well, and explaining how to people to live their daily life in a sustainable, wholesome, compassionate way. And then the next quality of bhāvanā, which we often interpret as just meditation, is sīla bhāvanā, the cultivation of virtue, the cultivation of morality. And of course, most of you know the 5 precepts, and that is the foundation of sīla bhāvanā, because the keeping of the 5 precepts, that's the foundation for being a human being. People who are born with a physical human body are not necessarily yet human. They only become human in the Buddhist sense when they keep the 5 precepts. That is the difference between human beings and humanity and the animal realm, that we can make the moral decision, the intellectual decision, choose for ourselves to say that I am going to live to a certain standard, whereas animals are just driven by their desires, their desire for food and for procreation and etc. And therefore they are reacting according to their desires. Human beings can say, I will live within boundaries of restraint, because if I don't, they cause pain and suffering to myself and others. If I break, if I kill, if I steal, if I commit adultery or take advantage of people sexually, if I lie and use harsh speech, cruel speech, gossip, frivolous speech, or I take drugs and intoxicants, that is the heedlessness and the carelessness which will have an impact on myself and impact on the people around me and the society as a whole. And so the 5 precepts are not only the foundation for being a human being and reflect your humanity, it's the foundation for being a good being, a wholesome being. And I tell the people in Thailand, when I first came across Buddhism, which was, I think it was in 1976 in Adelaide, and I read a book on Buddhism, and I just picked it up to kill time. I wasn't interested in Buddhism. I'd never heard about Buddhism, but I thought, well, this is an interesting book. I read it, and I read it all night, and when I put that book down, I knew I was a Buddhist. And so I tried to find out if there was a Buddhist society around, or any other Buddhists in Adelaide in those days. Adelaide was a city of about 800,000 people in those days. And I did hear that there was a Buddhist society. So I went along, and it ended up there was 5 other Buddhists in Adelaide. I was number 6. Yes. And so I went into that. They had a hall about half the size of this little room that they used to hire. And I didn't know anything about Buddhism, completely ignorant. I wore my shoes on into the building. They said, "Oh no, you can leave them at the door." And as I came in, I remember seeing they had the 5 precepts written up in English on the wall. And I remember looking at them, and I was a very fortunate person. Like many of you, I had very good parents who instilled many of those precepts already, of honesty and integrity and truthfulness and things like that. But I stood there looking at and reading each one of the 5 precepts, and I asked myself, if a person keeps those 5 standards in their life, would I consider them a good person? And I said, yes, they have to consider them as a very good person in this world. Doesn't matter what society they're born into, or what religion, or what culture, man or woman, what doesn't matter. If they were living by those principles, you'd have to say, yeah, they're a good person. I said, well, do you want to be a good person? Yes. You must live by those 5 principles from now on. And so I made a determination. At that point, I will live and try and endeavour to live by those 5 principles of the Buddhist teachings, which are the Aryan principles, the enlightened principles. They're the principles of the enlightened ones. All the fully enlightened ones will live by at least those 5 precepts, even if not even more, like the 8 precepts, 10 precepts, or 227 precepts, or the 311 of the Bhikkhuni. So you see that they're the foundation for Nibbana, foundation for liberation, foundation stone for behaviour and speech, which will then take you on for freedom from samsara, the realm of suffering. And when you live according to those 5 precepts, they close the door of the hell realms. Yes, if you're living by the 5 precepts, you don't have to worry about that. The Buddha actually guaranteed sīla sukhatīyati, sīla pokasampada, sīla nibbutinyati, tasama sīla visotaye. That's the words that the monks say at the end of giving the 5 precepts, isn't it? That means that these are statements from the Buddha. A person who keeps the 5 precepts, sīla sukhatīyati, that person will have happiness in their life. Sīla pokasampada, that person will have material gain and success in their life. So you want material well-being, keep the 5 precepts. That person, sīla nibbutinyati, that person will incline towards Nibbana. That's the foundation for Nibbana. So this is the moral foundations for being a human being, and it's the foundation on the path to liberation. And that's where we commit ourselves to cultivating awareness about our virtue, our precepts. And initially, when we keep the 5 precepts, we kind of treating them as a principle of, I will refrain from doing that, and it's almost like we're keeping a sense of restraint. But after time, when we start to see that our mind becomes more and more refined, our body becomes more and more refined. And for example, the first precept of, not killing. So, you give up, say, going fishing, or you give up sort of, spraying insects or killing creatures, and then you find that after a while, even you get more and more subtle, the compassion goes stronger. You don't even want to, say, watch a program on fishing on television. It's almost like, well, why am I watching that? To see someone enjoying hurting another being. Or, I don't want to hear about crime or murder. Or you incline away from that. You see that the mind becomes so peaceful and still in what is good and wholesome that you rejoice rather in the opposite when you hear of somebody doing something compassionate for animals or compassionate for other people. You hear about a doctor sacrificing to help, the poor or the sick or the ill. You rejoice in that. And you see that then these things, I remember hearing about a taxi driver in Bangkok who found a huge amount of money that a wealthy man had left in a briefcase in the back of his taxi. And he went to the police station, and instead of taking it home and spending it, he went to the police station and followed up, and they found the original owner and he returned it. And of course that owner was really joyed and gave him an extensive reward, but still he was doing it. When you hear that someone is that noble and good, and you kind of can't help but other beings rejoicing, that's an example of somebody who's not driven by greed and selfishness. And we rejoice in that person's life. And so you see that over time, the 5 precepts become a training in mindfulness as well. It's not just a training of restraint of, I better not lie, or, I better not slap the mosquito, yes? Because actually, the monks, we often can tell those people who are not keeping the precepts. For example, not so much here in Singapore, because you tend to look after the mosquito population very well, but and we're in a closed room with air conditioning. But sometimes, like at my monastery, I'm giving the precepts, and there's a group that have never been here to the monastery before, and the person's sitting there like this, and the mosquito comes past, they go, just as they're taking the bhāvanā, where am I? Yes. And it's habit. They have got the habit, and they know the reason that they're keeping the precepts only because the monks are giving them, but actually they don't keep them. Yes. So it's not the ceremony of taking the precepts that's important. It's actually the training of breaking that bad habit patterns and learning to have compassion, blowing them away. So the monks are very careful. We have very strict rules. So if a mosquito bites us, we give them a blessing, send them on their way. Yes, wish them well. And so you see that this learning new habit patterns is a part of the process of the development of the virtue. So we're learning habit patterns of self-sacrifice, giving up, not harming, compassion. And as that grows, then we notice that we will live more skillfully. And then the precepts become a way of practicing mindfulness. For example, you start to, for example, if you walk past a pond and you can see the fish there. Sometimes I notice that my workers in the monastery, the villagers, they walk past the pond and they see the fish that we've released in the pond, they think, 2 kilos, that fish is really delicious, that they're thinking, that's a meal. When the monks walk past the pond, they're thinking, it's wonderful, that fish is freedom and it's free of fear. It can live in the monastery as a place of refuge, and that you're giving that place of refuge to that creature. So the mental attitude shifts over time because you've developed the virtue over a long period of time. It's driven by compassion, driven by appreciation, driven by metta, there's loving kindness for all beings. And that's why the Buddha gave this beautiful discourse on the 5 precepts. He said that actually when a being keeps the first precept of I will not harm any living being intentionally, what they're doing is giving all beings freedom of fear that you will hurt them. So it's actually a gift to all of human life and animal life, all life on this earth, that if I make the determination of pānāti pātā weramani, I am giving the great gift of freedom. All these beings can be free of the fear that I will kill them, I will hurt them, I will destroy them with intention. And not only the human realm, but the birds and the creatures, the fish in the water, the insects in the sky, all those creatures are free of that fear. So that's a great gift you're giving every day, and you're keeping that first precept. When you keep the second precept, adinādhana, the Buddha says you're giving beings freedom from fear that you'll take anything that belongs to them. So it's almost this gift that you can trust me with integrity, that if you leave your bag here with lots of money, that won't be touched. That's a gift to all beings. When you keep the third precept, I will not commit adultery or take abuse physically, sexually, and any being that's in a situation of trust, then you're giving all beings freedom from fear. They can trust you, they have that integrity. You know you're being honest and truthful to them, especially the people that you have a relationship with. When you're giving the musawada, yes, your right speech, then you're giving beings freedom from fear that you're going to deceive them through your lying or false speech or harsh speech, you're going to abuse them, that you're going to gossip about them, or you're going to use frivolous, careless, useless speech. They can know that you're giving them truthfulness, you're giving them honesty. And I think probably a lot of people here have maybe followed the news in the last couple of years during the COVID and that. I've seen some of the leaders of not necessarily this society but in other countries who have actually just lied through their teeth. That's actually really seriously a big concern, that leadership, people in politics or leaders will actually deceive and lie and get people to believe those lies so that they can get power and influence and take advantage of that. And that is undermining this principle of respect for truth, which we need in our society. The Dhamma is about truth, and we have to have that sense of integrity and respect for truth. And that's important to instill in our children, in the society, that there is such thing as truth. There is such thing as right and wrong. It's not just what I think, what I believe. And we've seen that that's been a big issue in some Western countries now. Got almost bizarre that the leaders of those countries just will lie straight-faced and then get away with it too. So anyway, that's we see that the opposite was when people are truthful and integrity, you can trust them, then you feel a sense of confidence and it builds a strength in that society. The opposite happens. And harmony. And so then the Buddha said that, you're keeping the fifth precept, I'm restraining from taking drugs and toxins that confuse the mind. You're giving all beings in the world freedom from fear, that you'll be heedless with them, that you'll hurt them through your own carelessness, because you're under the influence of drugs and intoxicants. And that's a gift. So the 5 precepts is a gift of compassion to beings in the world. When you take on the 5 precepts, you're not just thinking, I'm going to just be a good person. Like originally my principle was, I want to be a better person. But it's actually, the Buddha's saying, no, it's much more than that. You are giving one of the greatest gifts to all other beings. They can live and be around you and be fearless around you, that you're not going to hurt them, harm them, take advantage of them, abuse them against the 5 precepts. And so that is compassion. I keep the 5 precepts, you keep the 5 precepts out of compassion. For yourself, you're not wanting to hurt yourself, and you're not wanting to hurt others. It's beneficial to yourself, and it's beneficial to others. It is ethical. So that's what I'll say about sīla, and the cultivation of sīla. It is the benefit and it is the foundation for the next aspects, which is citta bhāvanā, which is cultivation of the mind. And this is often the area that we associate with is meditation. So, when you come along to a Buddhist center and then the monks will teach you, I want to be a more peaceful person, I want to be a more calm person, I want to be a less stressed person, then okay, we need to look at mental health and we need to cultivate the mind. And there's ways of nurturing the mind, of developing our thinking, which is beneficial to us and beneficial to others, which makes us happier. So the first thing we have to do is develop this mindfulness and awareness of the mind. So if we don't really know ourselves or know how we think or what the feelings and moods are that are arising, we can't see that yet. We have to learn to hold up a mirror to our own minds. And holding up a mirror, how do we hold up a mirror to our own minds? Developing this concept of mindfulness or sati. Sati is the ability to recall the mental states and the physical states. So recall the physical body, what you're doing, so you're aware of what you're doing when you're doing it. Because a lot of people, for example, are not aware of what they're doing when they're doing it. For example, driving a car and they're talking on a mobile phone or something like that, their concentration is actually with the it's probably not legal in Singapore, is it? But it is in a lot of other countries. But they found that that's a big distraction, even to the point of considered it's more dangerous than someone who's drunk, because their awareness is with the conversation they're having, not with the process of driving. Or we often, the reason we have accidents often, and if we are an accident-prone person, you know what that tells you? You're lacking mindfulness. So if you're always stubbing your toe, breaking something or knocking things over, it shows that your mind has gone ahead to something else. It is not actually with your body, with your movement at the present moment. And we tend to do that. In our lives, we're thinking, what's next? You're probably, some of you probably think, what's next after Ajahn Nyanadhammo shuts up? Yes? Yeah, I've got to go and do this, I've got to go and do that. That's just a habit of mine. And what we're learning to do is say, no, I don't have to jump ahead. Enjoy this moment. This moment is perfect. Actually, it is. You're in an air-conditioned room, in a beautiful, peaceful country. You're with people who are keeping virtue. You're listening to the Buddha's Dhamma, teaching of compassion and liberation and peace. Yes, we may have a bit of discomfort sitting on the floor and cross-legged, but it's good enough. This moment is good enough. And so when we start to then, okay, I'll bring my attention not to what's next or what I should be doing or what's in the future, I will stay with this present moment. Then we start to be still. We can start to then, it's like holding that mirror. You have to hold the mirror still to see yourself. If you're moving the mirror around all the time, you won't see yourself very clearly. You have to hold it very steady and very still to see yourself. So too the mind. You have to hold the mind and know the mind very still. So mindfulness in the Buddha's teachings means to be fully aware of your physical actions, what you're doing with your body, whether you're moving your body, you're sitting still, whether you're laying down, sleeping, walking, then to be with that process in the present moment. And to know feelings in the body and the mind. So whether it's pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling in the body or in the mind, in the moods. To know perception and thoughts, and to know our memories, and then also to know what we call vijnana, which is the knowledge of just knowing through what we see, knowing what we hear, and knowing what we smell, taste, touch, and also thoughts. So we can place our awareness on these. But I'll keep it fairly simple in this discussion today, because that's a very big area of mindfulness and mindfulness training. I'll just talk about how to develop and what is mindfulness and how can we kind of strengthen our mindfulness in daily life. Mindfulness has certain qualities in Buddhist teachings. Mindfulness means to recall what you're doing, so recall the moment, ability to recall. So if you have a very bad memory as well, it shows you have very weak mindfulness. If you have very good memory, it shows you've developed a high degree of mindfulness in that particular area. Doesn't mean you have mindfulness in other areas, but in that area you have very good. But mindfulness also means to not only recall, but sustain that recollection and keep that recollection on the object that you want for attention. And we're finding that that's one of the big problems, particularly with children nowadays, is attention deficit syndrome. They cannot keep their attention sustained on an object or on a teaching or on a subject for any length of time because they've become conditioned through television, through computer games, to be distracted all the time. And you notice that to grab people's attention, they'll make advertising really sharp and direct. You can always tell when something is advertised on television. I don't see television very much, but now and then I go to a lay person's home and they've got the television on. You can always tell when something they're advertising is worthless. It's like some junk food. You can always tell it because it will be a very loud, intrusive advertisement. It'll be very intense, all the sounds will be very intense, the colours and the pictures will be very intense, and it'll be jumping all over the place. So use that as your measure. Junk food. Yes? Or junk stuff. Yes? Because it's more they're trying to create a reaction of likes, dislikes, or usually likes, obviously, but sometimes even fear, or, kind of shock. They're trying to create an emotion, to create then interest. So what's interesting is to develop mindfulness in Buddhism towards peace, what we're trying to do is develop a deep interest in a wholesome object. So I'm sure that many of you have done meditation on the breath. Is that correct? A lot of you have done meditation on the breath, watching your breath. Well, if you haven't, it's one of the subjects that most meditation teachers will teach you in the beginning, is to be aware of the breath. So to be aware of the breath, we actually have to take an interest in the breath. Some people say, my attention's all over the place, I can't stay on the breath. It's because you're not interested enough in the breath. You have to try and become very interested in the breath. And I'll give an example. This glass of water. Can I use you as an experiment? What do you see when you look at this glass of water? Just describe it to me. I'll leave it here so it doesn't shake. Describe this glass. Water in the glass. I'll repeat everything you say so everyone can hear.
Water in the glass.
That's interesting. The water in the glass and yep, that's it. I'm not putting it down. That's the normal response. That's what we normally say when I say, what do you see? Okay, now we're trying to develop when we're doing mindfulness of the breath, a total new way of seeing. We're sustaining our attention on the breath. So if I start to look at this glass and then describe what I see the water is about 2/3 full. It's moving around because my hand is moving around. There's a reflection on the surface of the water. I can see the thickness of the base of the glass. I can see the reflections. If I look deeper into the water, I can actually look through the glass and see the mat, and I can see you. And then I can actually start to see almost all these other people. And they're magnified because of the shape of the glass. As I look for more detail, actually there's some areas of the glass I can see. One gentleman over there is very, very clear because that area of the glass has got a very smooth surface. So I can see his face more clearly than everyone else's face. Your face is actually a bit blurred because there's subtle imperfections in this glass. So you see that if I start to just look at the glass and say, describe it, it's water in a glass. That's what most people see. When we're looking at developing meditation, we're looking in terms of depth and subtlety. We're trying to look very deeply into this glass and not sort of saying it should be a certain way, but just notice what's there, what are we seeing? That's interesting. I can see this gentleman who's moving. I can see the features on this person. Why is that person in that area of the glass really clear? It shows the glass quality is different from, say, this area. The longer I look at this glass, I can describe more and more about the glass. And it doesn't just become a glass, it becomes a looking glass. It becomes a magnifying glass. Yes? But also it has water in it which is useful to drink. So you get the point. When we're looking at the breath, then we're looking at where do I feel the breath? And in Buddhism, the most important thing about watching breath meditation is not where you know it, whether it's at the tip of the nostril or in the throat or in the chest or in the abdomen. The physical position is not important, wherever you can know it. Some people will find it very easy in the abdomen, the rise and fall, other people at the tip of the nose, wherever, that doesn't matter. The Buddha is saying what does matter is knowing it in time. Now. Are you breathing in or are you breathing out now? Is it an in-breath or out-breath?
It's always changing.
Oh yes, so you have to see the change. So you're putting your attention and interest, okay, it's changing, always changing, but is this one an in-breath or is it an out-breath? Where's the beginning of the in-breath? Oh, that's that subtle interest. How long is the in-breath? How subtle is it? Is it coarse? Is it smooth? Is it difficult breath, or is it a relaxed breath, tense breath? Where's the beginning of the exhalation? How long is the exhalation? When does the exhalation end? When does the inhalation start? So you're following, you're noticing each stage and trying to catch each stage of the breath. So out of deep interest. So when you have this deep interest, it's very easy to keep your mind on something. If you're not interested in something, you won't be able to keep your attention there. Yes? If you keep your deep interest on the breath, and then look and know the feelings of each point of the breath, sustained over a period of time. You'll find that in our lives we're very distracted by things. And actually we train ourselves to become even more distracted by things. So actually in our daily life we need to retrain ourselves in many ways. And part of being in a monastery, in my monastery and trained with Ajahn Chah, he would get us to keep our attention on one thing for a long period of time. And if we were kind of lost our attention on it, he would pull us back very quickly. He was quite strict as well. But I'll give you an example. Supposing that you're at home and you decide, I've got to get some paperwork which is in, say, the back room of the house. And so you get up, you walk through the room, oh, there's my phone there. Oh, I'll just check my lines or my messages or my emails. And then you pick up the phone and then you start to say, oh, this person's contacting me, I'll just get back and reply to them. And then, oh, maybe I'll check out some other information. Someone sent me some photographs, I'll look at the photographs. And so you spend, all this time on the phone, and then you think, oh, no, I'm supposed to go and get those papers from the back room. And then you go past the television's on, oh, the news, what's going on in the world, and so you watch the news a bit. Then you walk past the fridge, oh, I'm feeling a bit peckish, or maybe I have something to eat and drink. Then you eat and drink, and then by the time you've finished that, you've forgotten what you're going back to the back of the room of the house. That's the distracted mind. And so one thing we actually have to learn to do, and our meditation teachers will be very strict with monks about that, the training is, if you're determined to go and get that paperwork, and something more important doesn't come in the way, for example, the house doesn't start to burn down, so the house burns down, you put out the fire, right? But okay, if something doesn't, and these just are minor distractions, oh, look at the phone, no. I'll get the paperwork first and do that. So you're actually training yourself to keep your attention on your goal and your focus of what you originally intended, your original purpose. Because if you don't, you'll become a person who never finishes things. Have you noticed that there's some people who start lots of things and they don't finish those projects? That's because they're a zigzag person, I call them. They're zigzagging to the phone, to the this, to that, and then they forget the original purpose and the original goal. They start this thing and then they never complete. And so we're learning in mindfulness training how to also be concentrated on the purpose and the goal and do that, and then you can look at the phone, then you can do that. You can do that job. So instead of, some people, we have this concept of multitasking, which is really important. Actually, Buddhism says no. Yes? You should be focused and attentive wholeheartedly on the thing you're doing, but yes, you can make decisions. For example, if I'm doing something and then somebody comes with something very important, then, I have to assess, oh, this is more important than what I'm doing here. Then I'll deal with that, yes? And then maybe come back to this. But you don't throw this away and deal with all the other issues and then this one's not completed. You complete all the tasks that you're doing and you value them according to importance. There was a very interesting lecture that a lecturer gave, I think it was at Harvard. It was a lecturer in economics. He came into the lecture room and he had a glass like this and it was empty, and he took out 3 big stones and put them in the glass and they came up to here. And he says, is the glass full? And some of the people said yes. And then he took out very fine small pebbles and poured them amongst the stones, and it filled it up to the top. He says, now is it full? And some people said yes, and some people said no, they weren't sure. And he took very fine sand and poured it amongst those finer pebbles. Now is it full? And they started to get suspicious now. And then he poured water until it was completely full. And he asked, what was the purpose of that lecture? Any ideas? Saying, in our lives, we only have a certain amount of time. And actually, in our life, we don't really know how much time that is, do we? In any one day we have a certain amount of time, and so we have to know how to use that time. He said if he'd filled this glass with water first, then he could, if he put the pebbles in, it'd overflow. What he had to do was sequentially put the biggest things, the most important things in the glass first. Then the less important but also big objects can go in around it. Then the smaller ones until you pour the water in, the less significant. Then you can fill this glass up right to the brim. You can use that time in the day, use that time in life to its fullest. If we just fill our lives with the petty, minor, insignificant things, then we don't have time for the important things. So it was a very clear and significant lecture, because that's very true. So we have to be careful of, not filling our days with stuff on the internet or, distractions or, things that are not so important. We do the important things, fulfill the important needs and things that we have to do, so that we get that done first, and then the minor things can follow. Okay, so mindfulness and sustained mindfulness on the object and deep interest in the object is one of the things that's going to lead to cultivation of the mind. And what we're trying to do in the cultivation of mind in Buddhism is two things: make the mind more peaceful and make the mind more wise, knowing truth. So making the mind more peaceful, when we sustain the object, for example the breath, and see the beauty of the breath and sustain the object on the breath, then the knower and the object become one. And then there's great peace, great bliss and great rapture and great happiness, energy, coolness and serenity arises through samādhi, samādhi meditation. And so I'd really encourage you to develop that interest, that focus, and start doing it in your daily life, putting some time aside to do 10 minutes, morning and evening, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, morning and evening, whichever you can do. And you'll try and notice, when I first started as a layperson, I found it very difficult sitting on the floor, for example, as a layman, and as a Westerner I'd always been used to sitting in chairs. And so 10, 15 minutes of meditation seemed like an hour, it was very painful. And but I used to ask myself, watch the mind before I meditated and then after I meditated, and I'd ask myself, how's my mind? And I noticed that it was always some degree better. It was more alert, it was peacefuler, it was more relaxed. And so just by seeing those incremental benefits, I thought, well, this is useful for me. Just to kind of relax before going to work or something, and then coming back from work, relax. That was very, very useful. And the next purpose of meditation is the final thing. I'm going a bit over time, but I'll finish this off, is the development and cultivation of wisdom. And the development and cultivation of wisdom in Buddhism is, what is wisdom? What is wisdom? What we call someone who's wise. It doesn't mean someone who's intelligent, because you can have people who have a doctorate from Harvard or Cambridge or Oxford who are immoral, cruel, and beat their wives, etc., etc. So intelligence, IQ, is different from EQ. Emotional quantum is different from intellectual quantum. And emotional quantum is when we see that a person is wise in that sense that they have qualities. For example, they have foundation in virtue, they have a foundation in truthfulness, they have a foundation in patience, they have a foundation in loving kindness, they have a foundation in energy, they have a foundation in determination, they have a foundation in self-sacrifice, they have a foundation in clarity and understanding, they have a foundation in equanimity, balance of mind, and we call the 10 parameters. They have this strength of personality, this clarity and wise understanding. They don't increase suffering in themselves, and they're not creating suffering in others. And so wisdom in Buddhism means that you're ending your own suffering and not bringing suffering to others. So you're wise enough in your life to behave, act and speak and think in a way that you don't suffer. You're not causing your own suffering. So when we would go and see Ajahn Chah, for example, and we'd go and see him, he would not solve your problems for you. If you're saying, you had a bad day and, you weren't happy, he would say, what do you want or what do you want to get rid of? Because in the Four Noble Truths, we have the Dhammacakka Buddha image here. He's teaching the Four Noble Truths. We have truth of dukkha because everything is changing. Its cause is craving. We either want something or want to get rid of something. So if we're suffering, it's because of our craving. If we give up the craving, then the suffering ends. Nibbana happens. Release happens. And that's the pathway, by abandoning suffering. So he would often ask, if you're saying you're having a difficult time, not well or something like that, he's saying, what do you want or what do you want to get rid of? If you abandon that, then the suffering will end. So it's not blaming anybody else in society or in life or in the world for our own suffering. I remember one time I was invited to a monk I know was going to be travelling across the country in Thailand from the north to come to Ajahn Chah's monastery for the Katina ceremony, this end of the range retreat ceremony. And he said he's arranged this trip, and I asked to go with him. And he said yes, and he said that there's going to be a group of lay people in the same vehicle, hiring a van and travelling across the country. And it was the first time I'd really travelled with a group of Thai lay people. I've travelled with monks before. And I don't know, I don't know whether Singapore's the same, but Thai people love to eat and love to shop. And in shopping and eating is really important. And so we were travelling, and this was a 12-hour trip to get there at the best of times. But this group of people were particularly interested in both of these, shopping and eating. And so just about every town we'd go through, the people say, can we call into the market? Yes, we just want to get a few things. And they'd always use the excuse, we want to get it for the monks at the monastery we're going to. So they use their desire for shopping and they use the monks as the excuse. Yes, and I'm sure actually some people maybe here, maybe sometimes say, I'm just going out shopping, husband, for the monastery. I'm going to come here on Sunday and offer dana, but then they get a few things for themselves as well. And so we were driving across, and so just about every kind of major town, they say, could we just call in here, I want to get that. And of course, when they get out the car, they would disappear. And, we'd be sitting there sort of in this hot car waiting for them to arrive back. And, sometimes some people would come back quickly, and then the stragglers who like to do more shopping and things like that would come afterwards. So this trip started to go from a 12-hour trip to like an 18-hour trip. And finally we get to the major city before Wat Palelai, it's called Ubon Ratchathani. And I'm thinking, oh, within 10 minutes we're going to be at the monastery. And then the ladies say, can we just call into the market? We need to get a few things for the monastery. And I was going, oh, no. And so we pulled into this market and they just disappeared. I don't know what they were doing. I think they were having an evening meal or something like that and all these other things. And I'm sitting there and I was fuming. I was still a young monk then. And I was thinking, God, how much do they have to buy? And it's just here. They can go to the monastery, we can get out, and then they can go shopping. And I was sitting there, and I didn't say anything, but the senior monk just leaned over and he put his arm on my knee, and he patted my knee, and he knew I was kind of hot under the collar, and he said, don't blame anyone else. You're suffering because you wanted to come. And then he said the crunch line. He said, if you didn't want to be born, you wouldn't be suffering. And that really stuck with me right to this day. And it is absolutely true, wasn't it? I'd asked to go, and then I was blaming everybody else for the journey. And because I didn't like the journey, it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't how I thought it should be. And that's often what we're doing in life, isn't it? And so, who do we blame? We wanted to be reborn. There was that craving to seek out further existence. That's why we're here. And the things that come up in life are going to be challenging, and we have to deal with them. And it's that wisdom to deal with them so we're not sustaining, perpetuating further suffering. And we're not blaming others for our situation. We know that the cause of our suffering is our desire for existence, our desire to be here. And when we can overcome that, see through that, see things that nature as it really is, that's always impermanent, it's always unsatisfactory, therefore it's not worthy of calling self, then we can let go. And when we let go, then there'll be release, there'll be freedom, and then there'll be end of the cycle, the endless cycle of existence. So I will leave the talk on that, the 4 areas of bhāvanā, the bhāvanā of development of the sustainable environment and body, the development of sīla, the development of the mind, in becoming more peaceful and calm, blissful, and the development of wisdom. I think, am I correct that 3 o'clock is sort of the ending, or? Okay, so if there's some questions in the next 10 minutes before we dismiss, is that okay? Or if maybe your knees are giving up, I'll give you permission to go. But remember, you're suffering because you wanted to be here. Don't blame me. Yes, at the back.
Thank you, Mr. In general, nothing to do with the talk. Is Buddhism the only way to liberation, or is it possible that there are other ways to liberation? Even within Buddhism itself, there's so many types of Buddhism, and within the Buddhism, there's so many sects and sub-sects and all that. So is it possible that there are other ways to liberation besides the Buddhist path?
Well, you have to realize that Buddha didn't teach Buddhism. He taught Buddha Dhamma, and actually he defined his teachings. He referred to his teachings as Dhamma Vinaya. So to actually talk about Buddhism, that's a later concept of all the kind of the history, the background, the various teachings, the various developments around Buddha Dhamma. And so the Buddha was taught Dhamma Vinaya. He refers to his teachings all the time in the suttas as Dhamma Vinaya. Dhamma means like truth, the truth of reality. And Vinaya is the foundations, the ethical foundations around that. For example, the monks' monastic rules, the 8 precepts, the 5 precepts. That's Vinaya. That's the discipline around the structure, the form, which forms the foundation for truth, to see truth. So he taught Dhamma Vinaya. So there is a discourse where the Buddha said that as long as beings are practicing the 8-fold path, there will always be enlightened beings in the world. So the definition of can there be something outside, some other pathway, some other way of liberation outside of Buddhism, that's the wrong question. Can there be liberation outside of the Noble Eightfold Path? According to the Buddha, no. And so when we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, the first aspect is right view. The first aspect being right view is that actually one has to have the view, and the worldly view is there's a certain definitions the Buddha gave. You have to have the right view that there is such things as good and evil, and that it is beneficial to develop good and beneficial to abandon evil or unwholesome actions of body and speech. That one has to have the right view that there is a heaven and hell, which a lot of people don't have. That there is the consequences of action, the Buddhists define. That if you have the view that there's a consequence to what I do, say and speak, it has an effect on the world, then you'll be very careful about what you do, say and speech, and say and think. And so having that view affects how you respond and deal with the world. One has a view that there is mother and father, and they should be respected. That is considered right view, having that view. And it's interesting, for example, in the communist tradition, they used to take the children away very young, and they said, you don't respect the parents, you respect the state. And the state almost became more important, what the state wanted you to believe and think and how to live over what your parents wanted. So this is the opposite. The Buddha saying, no, there is such thing as the gratitude towards parents and appreciation of them. There is such thing as arahants, fully enlightened, and beings can become fully enlightened. That is right view. And the other, then there's more developed right view, which is the right view for liberation, is to see suffering, to see its cause, that is craving, to see that there is nibbana, liberation from that, and then see and develop the Noble Eightfold Path for that. That is right view. So a lot of the teachings that we see, do they have, the Noble Eightfold Path and all aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path in it? Does it teach right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness and right concentration? Yes, if those teachings do, then it's possible to become enlightened and liberated, free from suffering.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any last questions?
I have 2 questions I would like to consult you. The first question will be, like to ask if you explain a little bit about
that's a big subject. How many hours you got? Okay, body contemplation. If you like, and I'll say a few things here, but if you want, you can come up and see me afterwards and I can give more detail. But body contemplation is a very broad subject, and it is actually being aware of the actual physical body. So the Buddha says, gāyanā sati, meditation on the body, is all aspects of the body. So, I'm aware that I'm lifting my hand. I'm aware that I'm putting my hand on my head. I'm aware that the cessation at the top of my head and in the tips of my fingers. I'm aware of this movement. That's gāyanā sati, movement of body. But also there's a movement of the body of the breath going in and out. If I put my attention to that, that's gāyanā sati. But then there's also gāyanā sati of the external body. There's 5 things that you see of another human being when we look at them. Hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, skin, even the eyes are skin, a film, and teeth. That's all you really see of a human being on the externals. But then there's also the body, internal physical body. And that's a huge area, the 32 parts, the brain, the organs, the bones, all the various parts, the liquid elements. So when you look in terms of the body, then you start to see its component parts. And contemplation of the body is taking those component parts and placing them in front of you. Just like the Buddha gives an example, it's just like a doctor would do a dissection on a cadaver, someone who's passed away and donated their body. They cut them up. Oh, this is sinews in the leg, this is a heart, this is liver, this is lungs. When you place out a human body in a long line of parts, its component parts, which is the real person? Yes, which are you? Are you in the cells in the brain? This sense of you, me, mine, is that in the marrow in the body, in the bones? Where are you in the physical body? It's not the physical body that you're attaching to. But we do attach to the body as us. So the Buddha is saying, why are you attaching to that which will pass away? It arises and passes away. It's like, what's the essence? What is a real computer? And if you break down a computer to all its component parts, the chips, the plastic, the screen, and you take it apart and just lay it out, it's not a computer anymore, is it? It's just component parts. And which element of those component parts is the real computer? It's only when they're put together that you've got a physical computer, but you've got no functioning computer because you need software as well. And the software is like the mind in that sense, that comparison. And so when you're looking at the elements of that, that's another thing of gāyanā sati, is looking at the elements. Well, okay, I will take out all the liquid elements of this body internally and place them, for example, I was a biologist, so I like to visualize a biology lab and I put them in a glass bottle. So, tears in a glass bottle, blood in a glass bottle, urine in a glass bottle, I'm forgetting my English actually for these things. I think in Thai, but it's grease of the body in the glass bottle, etc., etc. And so you lay out all the liquid elements in the bottles, and that's just fluids, isn't it, of different colours, different texture, different sort of thicknesses. That's the water element there. And what will happen when the body passes away? It's either cremated or buried. They go back to nature, go back to that nature. the earth element is the calcium in the bones, in the teeth, or the protein which is in the hair. Hair is 98% protein. And so when you see that that's placed in a bottle and you just look at it, well, what is this? Is this a real self? No. Something we can easily discard. We cut off our fingernails and cut our hair frequently and just throw it away. And so then when we place that, then we can take the fire on, which is the heating. You know, when we feel too hot or too cold, that's the heat element within the body. And that's actually one of the first things that goes when we pass away is the heat element leaves the body and the person feels cold in the death process. And then, of course, you've got the fire element, then you've got the air element. You know, the air in the nostrils, the space in the nostrils, in the ears, in the lungs, in the stomach, in the gas in the body. You see that that's there, and that dissipates when a person dies. So you're contemplating the nature of a body, but you're coming back to the mind and saying, why is this mind attached to this being me or mine? You always come back to three things. Is this impermanent? Is this hair of the head permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent. If it's impermanent, is that happiness or unsatisfactoriness? You can't find an ultimate satisfaction, permanent and everlasting, in something that's impermanent. Therefore, what is impermanent and unsatisfactory and will disintegrate, worthy of calling an ultimate self? No, it's not worthy of calling an ultimate self. So then you abandon your attachment to that object. And that's how you work with contemplation of the body. And there's many other aspects of contemplation of the body, looking at the body, you know, after death and disintegrating and things like that. But I'll leave it at that level, and if you want, you can ask me a bit more later on.
Thank you very much.
But if you really want to develop that, come and ordain with me at my monastery. Okay? Okay, very good. So maybe one last question? Yes? Is there? If not, then we'll say, take leave, pay respects. Okay? Very impressed. You've sat very patiently and very respectfully and shown a lot of interest in the Dhamma. So I hope you're blessed with good practice and well-being and good health and prosperity, and may you look after Wat Palelai and support the monasteries, support each other in your practice, and treat this as a place of harmony and contentment and a place where you can find peace and tranquility in your life.